Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning, and welcome to this session at the CxC Festival on standardization. It's a roundtable, it's 90 minutes where we can go broad, we can go deep, and we can have time to discuss what's the role of standards and how can they help deliver what cities and communities need. My name is Brynskov. I'm the chair of the Living EU Tech subgroup, which is a forum in Europe where cities and other entities discuss, okay, so how can we influence the market, the regulation, and learn from each other. I'm also chair of the Danish Standards Committee on Smart City Communities, and I happen to be chairing the board of directors of the Open Agile Smart Cities network. So I'm joined here by eminent colleagues, Cristina Martinez from the European Commission. Hello, Cristina.
Hello, Martin. Hello, colleagues. Nice to be
Tania.
here.
Thank you. Tania Marcos from UNE in Spain, so the national regulator, or NSB as the lingo goes, National Standards Bureau in Spain. Hello, Tania. Hello, Tania.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Good to have you here, and sorry for the technical hiccup. Michael Mulquin, today representing IEC, I believe.
I am indeed, but also OASC. I never stop representing being the MIMS ambassador.
Good to have you here, Michael, and Bernard Gindroz, with many roles, but also very centrally chairing the ISO Technical Committee 268, which many will know is a really central committee in this space. Welcome, Bernard.
Thank you, and good day to everyone. Yes, I'm also representing SAN and SANELEC activities in the field of smart and sustainable cities and communities. Happy to be here.
And last but not least, Mr. Lindsay Frost, Dr. Frost, very active in the standard scene since long, representing ETSI, and I believe supported by NEC is how you would phrase it. Welcome, Lindsay, to this group.
Thank you very much. Also, I will be mentioning a little bit from Standard ICT project, which you will hear about more tomorrow. So all three things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the way we will run this session is that we will have a short-ish, but still substantial introduction or position from each of our distinguished colleagues here. And then we will invite, as this is a round table, a dialogue around the issues that are brought forward here. As you can see, there is a Q&A function, so feel free from the audience side to pose questions or point to issues. As always, the team is there to support you if there's anything, so you can write in the chat. But may I invite you, Cristina, to open up the floor with some reflections on what is the role of standardization, because it's such a complex issue. Of course, we all agree that standards are important and we should have them, but then what? How does it look from your chair?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. I actually believe I'm the only one who has only one chair in this panel. So I will try to sit in this one and present you the perspective that we have developed in the European Commission, especially in the area of smart cities. I hope you can see my screen. I have started my slideshow. Is that okay on your side? Can you see it?
We can see the screen. There's a little bit of the boxes where probably your controls are. I don't know if you can move the controls, if that's anything, especially the one on the side, I think.
Let me just see if maybe that's better. Is it better for you? Are you seeing now the full show, or?
Actually, it was the reverse, but I think, I mean, it's okay. I think we can move ahead. Now Now we see the full slide with a few boxes. I think we should go ahead and let you go.
Great.
The slides will be shared afterwards, so no worries if some corners are not here. Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. So maybe if you allow me, I would like to set the scene from the European angle. This morning we heard a very interesting comment from the mayor of Aarhus, who recalled us that interoperability is about sharing with others. And I actually fully agree with this statement. And I would dare to say that it's probably the diplomatic language in the digital world. This is where we come together. This is where we explain our visions, our understanding of what needs to be done, and then where we find compromises, agreements on how to share specific knowledge, information, data that helps us achieve a purpose. And so, because in the end, what matters is sharing knowledge, it's very important that we invest all that effort into making sure that all the good solutions that were presented today are indeed replicable. So that's one of the key words for us. It's scalability, replicability, and knowledge sharing. So that is for the purpose. Now, how we do this, as you know, is a bit more complicated. It's a never-ending story. It always existed. It will probably never be resolved, but in some specific areas, there are some objectives that can be achieved, I believe, with the right people, with the right understanding of what are the objectives. And so my purpose here is to present you how we see it for the Smart Cities community in the context of the Living in EU Declaration. As we know, this Living in EU Declaration that was mentioned earlier today is a declaration signed by mayors on how to join forces to boost this digital transformation for the sake of achieving the twin transition. In this declaration, there is a number of principles that the signatories have agreed upon. And one of them, actually the last principle, says that we agree to have interoperable digital platforms based on open standards and technical specifications, APIs, programming interfaces, and shared data models. That's the minimum that we want to share together. And in order to do so, we have a number of activities and measures that are being proposed. Let me just list you the technical measures that were proposed in the declaration. One is to use a commonly agreed list of standards and technical specifications to achieve interoperability. Yeah, and this is translated into the MIMS that everybody knows about. The second one is to make key enablers of city digital solutions, including data, infrastructure, and services available to all. That's, again, why we need this interoperability policy. And third is to use a common marketplace to share data, share digital services and solutions among cities and communities. And here, I believe we still need to discuss and agree on how we are going to identify this marketplace. So just to set the scene, we understand the current context and the discussions that we have with the different SDOs and the different stakeholders in the area as helping us to identify where the intervention of the European Union would be, let's say, instrumental. So these are some of the context elements that have influenced or shaped our prioritization of initiatives. The first one is that definitely the area of smart cities is a very complex area. It's at the crossroad of many sectors, as you know, but it's also owning its own challenges and own data. So it's not only the collection of different sector data, it's also producing its own data. So it has to rely on itself to define what will be the standards models or the reference methodologies used together. And it has some pressing issues. We heard about it this morning. Another point is that we realize that cities, local communities are facing a lot of issues with what concerns the first their capacity to integrate sophisticated technology. Not everyone is at the same level of development as Aarhus, for instance, but they also have some vendor locking issues that we know very well about. And as you know, the Commission has an open standards policy, even an open source actually policy, and we would like to promote it. There is another issue which is also defined very well in a number of policy documents, notably the one on data access and on AI. They have been also mentioned by my colleagues this morning, Martina, for instance, on the fair AI solutions. We have specific requirements in Europe. We have the third way that was referred to by our director, Thomas Cordes, which require a certain number of values and principles to be imposed in our discussions on interoperability. On the supply side, again, another picture here in Europe. We have 99% of our ICT suppliers are SMEs. They come up, let's say, not with a critical mass of solutions that can be observed in other regions of the world. The market is very fragmented. There is a lack of open solutions that are reliable, that are maintained, and that can be, let's say, replicated very easily. So cost efficiency is not always there. On the policy side, finally, standardization is a very complex landscape. It's actually a market in itself from the Commission perspective, if you look at the different bodies that are active in this area, from de jure to the non-de jure SDOs, it's very clear that some have some advantages and others are competing with them with other types of advantages. Being very fast to the market, for instance, is one of them. So there are a number of issues that we need to take into account when we decide to support and promote standards that will be meeting the MIMS. And just to add another one, we have also new policy priorities, like the willingness to deploy in Europe local digital twins and to network them. And that requires yet another layer of standards, which are still emerging, to put it like this. So, of course, the interoperability discussions have started a long time ago, and we already have in place a number of important initiatives. One of them is the European Interoperability Framework for Smart Cities and Communities, which is already in place and defining a number of, let's say, definitions, guidelines, principles that everybody in Europe who wants to deploy technology at the local level can follow. But it's not sufficient, I would say. We still need standards, we still need another reference models. Another interesting document that I want to mention here is for you, Martin, and the people who have been working on this with the ITU and other organizations, is the UN for SCC document, the report that was published. But again, we have not done the full work. One of the important commitments, as you remember in the declaration, was to have platforms in Europe for cities so that they can deal with the different sectors with internal and external data sources, and they can merge them together and create added value applications on top of it. The conceptual architecture that you see here is showing what are the different areas where the community, the living in EU community, thought that they would need to invest effort in order to find minimum interoperability mechanism. All of them are following different tracks, could be supported by different business models, but in the end, what we know is that in reality, this smart city platform is a very loose definition and can be implemented in very, very different ways all over Europe. There are a lot of different suppliers and products in the market that are supporting actually the constitution of those platforms, and we know still today that they're not fully compatible with each other. So this is our biggest challenge. And in order to support this challenge, I would say, I will show you later on how we want to address this challenge. But what we need to do, and I think this is the biggest step, is to have a very clear inventory of standards that are meeting those needs. Standards that, of course, can be chosen by the communities as they see fit. The Digital Euro program that was presented this morning has a specific intervention logic for the community in smart cities, in the smart and sustainable communities area. The first step will be, and we're currently in that step, is call one, where we're laying down the foundations for the cities who want to embrace the digital transformation. First with the CSA that will define the components and the principles and the blueprint for a smart communities data space. Secondly, with a CSA that will support the governance of the living in EU community. there will be a number of digital tools available for those communities to engage with citizens. And through the EDIH, which is the European Digital Innovation Hub School, there will be also a number of digital hubs supporting the work that Martina and the Living Labs are doing at the local level. Then the second step will be to deploy key components. And here again, we rely on the community, we rely on the supply side also to join forces and accelerate the adoption of those technologies by providing a number of important outputs, from procurement tools to a digital twin toolbox. There will be also, together with this procurement action, a number of pilot projects supporting the implementation of the data space. And then finally, in the future, we would like to scale up the deployment. We want to integrate some of these results, like the local digital twins, with Destination Earth. There will be the deployment of a high number of AI-enabled solutions, and we will supporting also complexity and complexity models in cities in order to tackle much more complex issues at the local level. So coming back to interoperability, this is perhaps what I was trying to convey in my introduction. It's the difficulty to go from the generic level, the methodologies that the UN for SCC or the European Interoperability Framework for Smart Cities have proposed, into something that can be concretely implemented, like a list of standards, a list of recommended specifications, or a reference architecture that everybody understands and can implement with the support of the different technology experts in the ground. So we understand the critical role that the MEMS will play. We are supporting its development, but now it's time to move to, let's say, a more concrete accompaniment of this MEM approach, so that cities can really hands-on start implementing their, let's say, their guidelines. So I'm coming now to the priorities that we have identified in this, let's say, 2-year work program for the Smart Cities and Communities area. The first one is, we in the Commission, we want to serve as the focus and proponent of interoperability policy that is compatible with the Living in EU principles and values. We want to make sure that all the standards that are made available are available at a fair price, that they are easily reachable, that they can be maintained and supported by, let's say, a very large community in Europe and also beyond. I'll come back to this later. The second point is to identify and promote existing European solutions, because we have plenty of them. I'm glad we had this session before where we show how successful we can be when we join forces, and learning from each other is definitely the first step. So we want to promote those solutions. There are a number of different initiatives supported by the Commission to do so. We also want to identify gaps or needs for future solutions, and that's where I think the work that my colleagues are doing on the local digital twin standards is very important, because here we feel this, we sense that really we have a competitive advantage, and we need to build on the knowledge we have acquired and on the experience of some cities in this area. So this is really work in progress. And finally, we need to cultivate a vibrant standardization ecosystem, because it's not enough to have one standard. We need to maintain them, we need to push them, we need to document them, and make sure that the ecosystem is well aware of the new challenges ahead, well before proprietary standards are coming on the market. Our short-term objectives, to summarize a little bit the discussion, will be to promote the European Interoperability Framework for Smart Cities and Communities, and the use of open standards, in particular for local digital twins. On the supply side, we want to support the ecosystem of companies that are now not signatories but supporters of the declaration, to help us in creating this set of open standards and to map them to the minimum interoperability mechanism. Plus, that requires also, by the way, a number of discussions on how we're ensuring compliance. On the demand side, we want to build the capacity of EU cities and communities in the use of those standards, of those mechanisms and services that are provided by this framework. And that will be, of course, through the funding of the digital program, but not only. So we rely very much on our networks like the Eurocities and the NLs to support their stakeholders in this process. And finally, because we're here discussing with ISO, with IEC and ITU colleagues, we are very much convinced that the EU values and principles that we promote through this declaration can be of interest of a very large number of countries around the world. And so one of our commitments is to share with you the learnings and the principles that have been developed in our policy, in the AI policy, on the data, free flow of data policy, and also in some others like the GDPR, and promote these and show that they can actually work, that they can actually create value, but they can also be respectful of those values that are fundamental of the European project. And finally, a last word on the local digital twin standards, which is an area in development with lots of promising results. We think that there is a number of specific issues that should be tackled. We are already engaging with a number of constituencies and seeing how we can do this with the supply side. The issues to be looked at are the social-economic aspects, how to engage with citizens in a, let's say, more formal way, the integrated service governance, which is one of the issues, of course, and looking at the workflow sharing and service pathways that could be developed, data coming from different sources, but this is no new business, the capacity and digital skills in the public sectors in developing local digital twin functionalities and business processes, striking the balance between none and too many standards. That's yet another issue that indeed is probably found in many other use cases. Create a fair market with players respecting the principles of the declaration, and finally need to ensure that fair access to open standards are done respecting those values and by fair, sorry, I think it's fair with the capital letters here, because we are very well aware of not all standards are available at a fair price. So that's in a nutshell, I think, the type of issues that we would like to discuss today. And I hope that with this set of slides, I have presented the issues in a convincing way. Otherwise, don't hesitate. I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cristina, for that comprehensive overview. And as said, the slides will also be shared later. So now at least the dance is open. There are many issues, but also some concrete next steps. May I invite you, Tania, to follow on to this. Thank you. Of course, we will come back to these issues and discuss around the table. If you could share from your side, Tania. Yep.
I have several hats, as you mentioned. I'm a standardization officer. I work in the Spanish Standards Association, that is called UNE. And that's our main purpose, to develop national standards, but also to contribute to the European ones in CEN, in CENELET, in ETSI, and also internationally as a member of ISO and IEC. But also we participate at the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, where the members are the states, the member states. And this is due to the activity on the smart cities committees. So that's why I'm here to talk about Spain. Why Spain has something to say about the standardization and cities. I'm also, I was the representative of the CEN, CENELEC and ETSI sector forum on smart sustainable cities and communities towards the European Innovation Partnership on Smart Cities of the Commission to identify the standardization needs. So next, please. I will tell you that, next slide, please. In Spain, well, you know Spain. Spain is a big country, but in terms of population, we are not that big. What we have is a good network of cities that are collaborating. The first one is the FEMP, is the Spanish Federation of Local Governments. It was established in 1986, I think, when Spain joined the European Commission, and it gets the representation of over 90% of the Spanish local governments. That it's a lot. Some of them are very small, some of them are bigger. We only have a few cities with over 1 million population, like Madrid and Barcelona, and the rest is nearly reaching that, but very, very few cities are over 500,000 inhabitants. So the needs of the different cities in Spain is a tricky issue, because we also have islands, very isolated locations in distance to the continent, but also we have territories that are rural and are quite isolated due to the orography of Spain. We have a lot of mountains, you know, not only nice beaches, but also we have very nice beaches where the people is not only the inhabitants, but in summer time we have thousands and millions of tourists. And all this is what makes the city needs very, very complex. When we talk about smart cities in Spain, we talk about a specific network that was established in 2012. They use the technology. They thought, we are in 21st century. We need to use the technology that is available, the ICTs, and the digitalization as a tool to transform our cities. And they shared all the information they have on investments on technology to solve their real day-to-day problems. And this is a network that now it's nearly 90 cities that are big, and other 40 cities that are smaller and are followers. And this is REFI. You may have heard of that because it was such a good experience that it was replicated also in cities in countries in Latin America. And more recently, it was established a specific network for cities, not only cities, but territories that are dealing with tourism. They are so-called smart tourist destination network. The tourist destination is not just the city, but you can have people around several municipalities that they join together for terms of tourist promotion and attractiveness. And this is the key of this activity, that you can share the resources you have in federated systems, and that's what allows you a better interchange of information to improve the tourism sector for visitors and also for the population, the inhabitants. And well, this is basically what we have in Spain. So a good relationship and coordination of cities that realize that individually you can't do very little. You can also have a voice in the central government, in the different departments, and also in Europe in terms of granularity. And the most important thing is that when they detected the need, they reacted, and then they came to standardization. As a standards body, we we have this technical committee established also in 2012. Next, please. Next slide. It's the number is 178, and it's a number well known in standardization committees in UNE, because it's also the biggest committee ever. It has over 700 experts from very different areas, and we have been working in the priorities that cities identified to be standardized. We joined the industry at all the levels, and also the not only local governments and cities, but the central government with different visions. We have people from climate change unit, from urban agenda. We have all the sectors are represented as well. And the most important thing is that the typology of the experts you can have in cities that are very big. You can find this profile of civil servants that are very skilled in technology and digitalization, but that is not so common. So it's difficult to find civil servants that can join standardization and put the time they are assigned to not only develop these national standards, but also to check what's going on at European and international level and contribute. And the good thing here is that the profiles are so diverse that you can find not only those people very skilled in ICTs, but also you have from the geography sector, for the collaboration with other technical committees as well. We are talking about security in cities and resilience, and there are many things that are already standardized, and we need cooperation and collaboration, not to overlap, because at the end, the expert will have to wear many different hats at the same time, so not overlapping the works. What they asked, the first thing they asked back in 2012 was this interoperability. They needed to use data, and they knew they were not, in many occasions, the owners of their own data, and the city was not aware of many of the basic information they needed to take data-driven decisions. So they asked, because there also was the opportunity of getting funds for digitalization, and they don't wanted different visions and different opinions. They wanted to work together and go for the best options. And then we standardize we started with the standardization of the smart city platform and the interoperability requirements. And that was a very important task. And again, some people from the technology side can say this is very relevant for the cities, but there are smart cities that can't afford that. What they want is to simplify as much as possible all their contracts in the administrations. So they welcome that they have a reference standard that they can ask for application. So it's not necessary that everybody understand the technical concepts, but they can understand the need to coordinate and the need to share this information so that we can work forward. And having said that, we also work for the cities because they need it. All the commitment they have in terms of open data and transparency. We offer the standardization work to develop a national standard to produce an initiative on open data. It's not just to publish the data, you need an initiative and how to manage all those data. And for example, more recently, we have just published a national standard on support of, we started with the Smart City platform. We had the concept of smart building. The cities need to know and to establish a relationship with the data of different buildings so that they can get the city ready for any event that is happening in any part of the city. And we have developed a specific semantic for the smart building so that you can enter the data into the platform and really use them as they have a standardized semantic in Spain. And what else can I tell you? Well, the importance of working in bringing the cities in standardization is that all this work we have produced makes our cities aware of the importance of getting a common understanding and having a position, because they are being asked for energy management systems in their buildings, their administrative buildings. They are being asked of accessibility issues, for example, for persons with disabilities. They are being asked for parks, for water management, for many silos. And again, when you get to standardization, they really understand that they need a smart office where to coordinate all these efforts, set priorities, and have a common vision for the not only short term, that in most cases is because of the mayor, but a longer need and long term for the city, for what they want to become after this process of transformation into a smart city, smart, sustainable city, community, whatever you want to call it. We didn't pay much attention to that label. We can be smart. For us, smart is because you are using the data and the digitalization, but you need governance, you need innovation. You need to be aware of this and work in a network. And when we say cities, any kind of human settlement. And with this in mind, as I told you, we are quite active, not now because the standards are already published in ITU. We publish standards on smart ports and on smart buildings. And we are very sorry that we don't contribute that much in ISO, which is very prolific also, or IEC. And we want to bring the best of that experience to Europe, because we really think that European cities have a common view of the needs of the European citizens that are in some cases quite different from the international vision. And we have a European framework on legislation. We have already commitments from the mayors. We have this back experience. We are not starting from scratch. We are, the Spanish cities, for example, participated in European funded projects for the last 5-10 years, and very actively and with good results. What we want to see is that all that experience can be put in common, and then let's do the next step. And we are also contributing in the United for Smart Sustainable Cities, the U4SCC initiative from United Nations. And well, you will see one of the deliverables for this year talking about the Smart City platform. and the experience we have in Spain. We have, and you don't need to be only just a big, one big city. You can, as I said, use that and the concept for smaller cities. And this is something that really helps the cities. And we are also working on the tourism for CxC. And next slide, please. What I want to say, I don't remember if I have something. Yeah, the very end. In the next slide is that we keep on producing national standards, but not that much, because now what we are trying to do is making all these standards to be really used in the calls for tenders and all the projects that are ongoing in Spain, and help the cities to take advantage of this standardization work to give a better response to the European funds and contribute as much as possible. They have to see standardization as an ally, not as something that we are asking them for funds, for time, for their resources. The standardization will benefit all of them, and this is something that will keep on going. But again, we have to be very careful when we want to produce standards for the cities, because the priorities of the cities are quite complex. We talk about the citizens, and again, when you ask a city about the citizens, every citizen is even more diverse than the cities themselves. So they are more unique in their response, and you have to start from the point that you cannot have a standardization to satisfy everyone. You have to create first a framework and be very clear on what do you want at the medium term and the long term. So we really congratulate OASC for all the work on sharing this experience and the impulse they are having to the Living in EU initiative, because we really think that Europe needs a voice, strong voice on digitalization and on smart cities. And well, just to say that we will continue collaborating, and I don't know, I am missing anything important.
Thank you so much, Tania. Well, in any case, we have more time around the table to pick up. But this is incredibly impressive. I mean, now we have the big view from the European Commission side. Then we have an incredibly impressive. I mean, I work also on the Danish national level, and just seeing, how well organized the Spanish is. I mean, of course, I'm not saying the Danish is not organized, but just to see now how for a decade, really, this is linked to national strategy. It's contributing to the international level. It's listening to what are the needs of, well, the mayors, the politicians, but also the civil servants. And of course, there's a market reality around that, which is, incredibly diverse. How can you even start standardizing that? So thank you very much for that very impressive and comprehensive overview. So we mentioned a few times, thank you, Tania. Michael, we now see the slides here on the screen. Several of the initiatives that you have been quite involved in. So there's the U for SSC. So right, the upcoming platforms, suggestion for a new architecture for sustainable development and so on. But please, I mean, having been around the standards block a few times and seeing it from a couple of vantage points, could you please share with us, what is there now and what do we really need to discuss? The floor is yours, Michael. Thank you for being here, not just today, but also in general, leaning into this conversation.
Okay. Thanks very much. Can you hear me and can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear, Michael.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So just to start with, I know many people have the kind of attitude towards standards that they're boring, or that potentially even that they're restrictive and difficult and shouldn't be there at all. And it is actually a very important thing for us to stand back and to remind ourselves about the importance of standards. Standards are simply clear descriptions of agreed best practice. They're nothing more and nothing less than that. It's an agreed way of doing something. It's a common solution for a mutual problem. And the great thing about standards is that they reflect the expertise and know-how of the often world-renowned experts who developed each standard. And the great thing about working within the international standards field is that you actually get large numbers of international experts being able to bring together their knowledge, their understanding, their experience to help put together some solid examples of good practice that everyone can benefit from. And of course, international standards are greatly of great value. They enable products to work safely with each other anywhere in the world. For example, the MPEG standards enable the sharing, distribution, and exchange of content on a whole range of different devices everywhere in the world. And they allow us to share our content and enjoy it. And also they facilitate global trade because they make it easy to buy and sell and use products in many markets. A USB stick manufactured in China can be used on a computer board in Norway. Halogen bulb from Germany can be used in a lamp in Brazil. Standards are really important. And of course, they're not just about products, but they also relate to services, to management, to good practice in how you manage the delivery of things. And that's where ISO is very strong. And when we think about smart city standards, let's not forget the importance of good management standards to help manage digital transformation in the cities and the communities around the world. Just to say a little bit positioning, because many people don't know what IEC is. So IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, is one of the 3 internationally recognized, World Trade Organization recognized international standards development organizations. We've already heard ITU mentioned. ISO, we're going to hear about more, and that's very well known around the world. And IEC, we're very proud to say, is ISO's older sister. We started this process and we continue to work very closely with ISO. We have almost identical processes and ways of working. And between us, we have a joint technical committee, JDC1, that is a joint committee, again, working on very, very similar lines to IEC and ISO on developing ICT standards. And so that's where IEC is. We're very proud to be able to provide to the world the electrical and the electronic standards that are so important in many different aspects of life. And IEC has developed many standards. This is a little bit old, but somebody counted, I don't know, it must have taken them quite a lot of work, but they counted 1,814 standards that the IEC has developed that are really important for cities in managing the services that they run. Now, just stepping back a bit and thinking about the types of smart city standards, let's not forget these many, many thousands of existing standards on which cities and city services are based. The basic plumbing, the basic foundation for the way cities work today. And although many of these standards may have been developed 10 years, 20 years ago, they're still, many of them are still relevant, even as we think about moving towards smarter cities. And so building information modeling standards or the traditional geospatial standards and many other aspects of standardization are still very relevant as we look towards moving into the future and are still part of the overall packages of standards that cities need to use. But when we think about smart city standards, we also think about those standards that enable incremental step-by-step improvements in different aspects of life. For instance, the Open 311 standard, a really interesting, very specific standard that enables one telephone number or one website to be an access point. If somebody wants to contact the public sector with any issue, they don't need to be passed from one telephone operator to another. there is a standard that enables you to phone that one number or to go to that one website, and from there to be able to find the people who can help you deal with the issues that you have. And that's great. That's really important. That's an example of how digital and smartness are helping things move forward. But it just makes existing things work better. That's not to say it's not important, but the thing I think we're all interested in are those standards that are there to help our cities transform, to become much more effective in delivering what the cities need, citizens need, and being able to tackle some of the key issues of our time, like climate change. And what we're talking about there are these big, wicked issues where you need a whole family of different sorts of standards to be developed together to help cities make a step change in the way they work. And of course, we've been hearing quite a lot over these last 2 days about digital twins, data spaces, and so on, where there's huge potential for cities to move forward, but where we need a whole set, and Cristina did a great job of listing some of the different areas where we're looking at digital twins, where we need to develop standards that will make cities able to, and communities able to put these things into place. And so smart city standards are really important. They speed up the move to smarter cities. If we get them right, they can really help all of us benefit greatly from all the opportunities that technology offers. So the key, I guess, insight, I suppose, that the IEC brings to this whole situation is the recognition that when you're developing standards, it's often not enough just to focus on a particular piece of equipment or a particular thing. You can't develop standards for a car by just looking at a gearbox or a part of a gearbox. You need to understand the car as a whole. And so in order to develop effective standards about the many different aspects of, for instance, how you make a car that works really well and is safe, you need not only to understand the particular thing itself, but you need to understand the context in which it's placed. And we've had to do this, we've had to remember this clearly as the IEC, because the interesting thing about electrical and electronic standards is that although they're hugely important, and electricity and electronics penetrate into almost every area of life and city life in particular, but almost in every case that they're not as the solution itself, but as part of the solution. They enable solutions that are built together with a whole range of other things to work. And so what the IEC recognized a few years back is if we want our electronics and electrical standards to really make a difference, we needed to start to understand the whole system in which our electrical and electronic standards play a part so that we can make sure we do a good job. And so the IEC has set up a number of systems committees with the role of standing back, if you like, and understanding things like smart grid, smart manufacturing, issues like that, to see them as they work together so that they're able then to provide the information to the IEC technical committees so that they can then work on developing the right standards, understanding the context in which their standards need to work. And we in the IEC Smart City Systems Committee, really that's our job. We're there not first and foremost to develop standards, but first and foremost to get a good understanding of how smart cities work, what are all the key issues that smart cities are trying to deal with, and how electrical and electronics play a role in that, so that we can then give the right support and advice to the specialist technical committees. So while we do make some standards, international standards, and they are practical and useful ones, our main role is to support others in making the standards, not only our own IEC technical committees, and we're working with a number of those to help them develop their specialist standards in smart cities, but also to work with ISO, ITU, and other relevant standards development organizations to help us to see how each of us can bring our own specialist expertise to make the consistent set of standards that cities need. And so at the moment, there's a number of things we're working on. We're looking at guidance standards like a reference architecture, common language, terms, definition frameworks, to help provide a really good, clear context about how cities work, cataloging and mapping smart city related standards, and scoping families of standards to help solve city needs. Just quickly to mention in closing, the great thing is that international standardization, we're getting better at collaborating. We have the Joint Smart City Task Force of IEC, ISO and ITU that's doing a lot of great work. And the other thing is that we're working together now to set up joint working groups to look at some of the key issues like developing a smart city reference architecture or looking at urban digital twins to help make sure that the work of our specialist SDOs is able to link together with the work of the other specialist SDOs to make sure that cities have standards that work well together. Finally, MIMS and standards. The interesting thing about the MIMS and why I'm so pleased to be part of this is that they have a very important role in the whole standardization environment. First of all, the important thing about the MIMS that we're working on is that we're not developing new things in our MIMS. What we're doing is we're basing our MIMS on existing standards and standardization work. So what we're doing is we're enabling the many cities and communities around the world to have a good start into the standardization environment, to get going, to start immediately to see some real benefit, to see interoperability in practice, but with the knowledge that once they've implemented a MIM, they can then continue to build on that by pulling in lots of the other standards that have been developed, and knowing that they can go as far and as fast as they want in order to become to benefit even more from the good practice that's been developed. So we see MIMS as a good start into the standards world. But on the other side, we think that the MIMS can act as minimum viable products, because what we're doing is by working with many cities in implementing these minimal interoperability mechanisms, we're getting to understand, and this is going to give us an increasing understanding of what else cities need. Much of that will already be there because it's already part of existing standards, but we may well find more and more that we're able to identify things that need to be standardized that people haven't recognized yet. And so what we see is, as we develop and implement these minimal interoperability mechanisms, we'll have the chance to feed in the information we're gathering to the more formal standards bodies to help them develop standards that they can be confident will be very useful to the cities and the communities that they serve. Thank you very much. That's me done.
Thank you so much, Michael, there. So it's clear now from what we have seen, there are some very, very well-known issues that we can address, one thing. Two, there's actually a lot of collaboration going on already. So you mentioned the final point here about the collaboration on the global level is actually established. There's this intricate system of liaisons between the different SDOs, the standards fora. But still, it's a challenge to then make strides. But I take your message, Michael, generally as a positive one, that many bits and pieces are understood and in place. Now let's do the work. And you also emphasized the need for some minimal common ground, and thank you for doing that. Bernard, you have also been around for a while. I remember seeing each other in many fora. So you work on several levels. You mentioned you represent AFNOR, you represent certainly a lot of activities on the European level. So there's a sector forum, which was in previous incarnations called a coordination group. You serve also on the global level on the ISO TC 268, and with the colleagues related many, many more dialogue lines and so on. Thanks for being here with us as one of the other seniors who have really seen both what can be done and what should be done. Could you share with us a few suggestions? Well, first of all, what do you see and what do we need to do?
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. I will just share my screen here. Okay, so good day, everyone. I'd like to give you also some few inputs about how we move together, how also digital transformation is important at city level. First of all, when moving for cities development, we can see here on these two pictures, we can feel that the challenges are very complex, but it also offers great opportunities. But these opportunities could become real thanks to setting a long-term vision and commitment, to have citizen engagement, but also digitalization and support as an enabler of all this transition. As Michael also underlined, the holistic approach, integrated planning is very important. And standardization could definitely bring or develop tools that will support the cities in each of these different activities, setting the long-term vision, having the citizen engagement, and having the appropriate and proper digitalization. In fact, we need to have this type of step-by-step process. First of all, because what we will decide today will probably take a few years for having a final roadmap approved by everyone. Then it will take years to develop the city as we want to, and it will last for decades. So it's very important to make the right decision now. And it's exactly where digitalization could definitely help a lot, and standardization could bring trust and confidence about existing pathways or solutions. So first of all, setting a vision and committed to engage in this transformation needs a very strong political engagement, but also citizens' engagement. Second, then, after this type of commitment and decision to engage, we need to elaborate some roadmaps with targets. And the definition of targets with the performance indicators are very important. It will be exactly the target, the objective we would like to meet, and standards, again, help a lot in that sense. And finally, when it comes to implementing these different roadmaps and the strategy itself, the culture of results is very important. We need to measure the progress. We need to evaluate the progress against the plan objectives we had, and also to communicate regularly. And here, without digitalization, this is almost impossible to go and to move in a very proper manner. For each of these different steps, standardization are key driver and booster. It helps in defining what is needed and how to progress. It also helps in setting a benchmark of best practice, but also bench learning. And in that context, as I said before, digitalization, and Cristina also underlined that extremely well, it is important to be able to collect data for setting this type of performance indicators. It is important to monitor everything and to follow the progress. For that reason, it's very essential to have the right data and to have the right frequency for refreshing this data that will also represent the progress. And using some recognized, let's say, major or macro data is also very important for communicating to the citizens and the different stakeholders. And that's exactly what we are trying to do. And digitalization will definitely bring these new capacities for cities development, for engaging with the citizens. Now, back to what I showed before, the decision-making phase. That is extremely critical, very complex, engage a lot of responsibility because, as I said, what we'll decide today will last for decades. And in that sense, we need to have best practice we can trust in. We need to have simulation to evaluate and visualize the impact of different options. And that's exactly where, again, what Cristina explained at the beginning, digital twin could definitely bring these capacities and help in the decision-making phase, the pathway to cities' sustainable development, but also engagement of citizens, because we need their participation, proactive participation. The other one will ensure continuity between the different political mandates. That's very important. In this context, as I said, standards would be useful and are tools in support of each of the different steps I've shown before and will drive the change. They are bringing trust and confidence among everyone because it's developed on a consensus base and will bring to all of you coherence with regard to what has been done and consideration of all the different stakeholders, categories, but also relevant areas to consider. Just in a few words to sum up what are the keys to the successful support to cities and communities. First of all, we need to engage with cities. And this is extremely key. Cities knows much better than anyone what they need to have, what kind of support they are looking for, and also having this expression of needs from their citizens. Standardization will not harmonize the solution for all cities. Cities will not look like each other in the same manner. We need to have as a priority the local culture and the local identity. And this is something extremely important. That's why we need to collect this expression of needs from the cities and their citizens. We need an exchange platform to collect all this expression in a way that it will feed the standardization work at any level. At national level, because most of the time it's easier for the national cities to discuss in their national language, in fact, and then to move this expression of interest at European level, at global level, for an appropriate and performant standardization development. We need also a strengthened collaboration between SDOs, as also Michael underlined before, to avoid a kind of overlapping competition, but alignment of the principle, alignment of tools in support of the cities. At EU level, it is especially very interesting because we have a EU legislation that is common to all member states. If we have some adapted European standards, it is also common to all member states, and even a bit more of that, 34 countries in total. So you can see the parallel. Having the legislation, having the standards in support of the implementation of the legislation, but also in support of development, active, efficient development of the cities. So just to conclude very quickly, because you have had so far a lot of details, digitalization is the key enabler for the digital transformation, the transformation of the cities. It's something very essential. And digital twins are booster because they are promoting, engaging with their citizens, and they will also allow everyone to move to decision-making process with the identification, visualization of the impact of different solutions. And finally, standards will be the key drivers and accelerator of the digitalization for the sake of the cities and communities, and moving to something that is efficient, quality of life enhanced, and for everyone to feel well and to keep their own identity in the cities they are living in and also they love. That's very quickly my quick presentation.
Thank you so much, Bernard. I mean, it's not a fair task to ask you to condense in so few minutes, but I think it is clear. It's decision time. Excuse me. Digital is there and it's needed. The complex modeling, the digital twins, whatever we call it, is now becoming within reach for our governance, okay, not for the technology's sake, but for the governance. The diversity problem, how do we stay diverse? I mean, the mayors do not want to, go out of a job, and the politicians want to be, there and have a say, while standardization. So we have this dilemma while we need to move. Very clear and very, very interesting. So we park that also on the table. And thank you, Bernard. We invite now Lindsay Frost to give us his lay of the land. And Lindsay, you have been also following, well, many things, but certainly trying to see then how can we in very concrete specification terms express, I was going to say, all of the above. So, Lindsay, how far have we come and what do we still need to do? Over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, can you see my whole screen or do you see black boxes?
We see everything perfectly, including yourself.
Okay, great. So I took to heart how can standards deliver? And I want to take up the point Bernard mentioned that standards are tools, and you need to find or sometimes create the right tool. So I'm supported as Martin mentioned, by the company NEC. And I just want to say why NEC is supporting me is because, one moment, some clicking process. I'm actually working in Heidelberg in Germany. I'm associated also with the StandICT project, I'll mention a little bit later. And I'm happy to be on the board of ETSI, trying to assist that the whole ETSI community gets behind smart city standards, as well as the new ones for AI, which are a huge horizontal problem, which impact also cities, but a little bit more in the future. And most important today, I'm chairman for some years of the ETSI committee, which is standardizing one of the MIM candidates or options for NGSI LD. And plus, I'm happy to work in the past and currently with Bernard and others on various CENLEC activities which overlap with smart cities. So just to say, why is NEC supporting my work? We have a vision which I'm really happy with, really behind it, that the digital twins or local digital twins should be ready in about the 2030 timescale. That is, to be able to collect the information from the cities, make it understandable to humans and applications, and have a model which can then be used also for things like prediction or simulation or optimization, even more for things like energy and pollution. So this is the vision, and where are the tools to make that happen? That's the point. NEC is pushing hard to get interoperable standards. It makes everyone's life easier, and as much as we can, a lot of open source, because that gives everyone a chance to see what is under the hood, under the construction of the software, and also for security and other reasons. It's very good to be able to analyze software as you go. So what do cities really need? For this talk, I simply said data really is the new oil. It's greasing the wheels of all your public and private services. It's an energy source for making things happen, and things like optimizing car parking or energy balance in buildings just don't happen without data, and especially some kind of a pump, some kind of a way to get the data from A to B. And in ETSI, what we've done is we've created since some time a standard for API and a protocol called NGSI LD. And you can find information about it here in this introduction. You can see in this picture, the idea is there's a kind of a middle layer where the data is dragged out or pumped in from applications of the users or from IoT systems or from existing databases and made available to various applications or AI or whatever. The point is, we tried to keep it very, very open. So we have access for linked open data. We have very open source. I think we've got 5 different open source application deployments which are using NGSI LD, and we're using a particular way of manipulating data which is really no longer leading edge, it's more like mainstream, called property graph modeling, and you'll find a lot about that when you go looking. But the point is, we try to let everybody keep and use what they've got and just make it more accessible. And we've taken as a basic protocol something very similar to, well, HTTP, like you see in web servers, and it's pretty well adaptable to most people's software. But that toolbox of NGSI LD is not enough. Cities really need, as we've heard today, guidelines, standards for processes, especially common dictionaries for what the French or the Germans or the Danish call a sandwich may be quite different in let alone what they refer to as a building address. So these are essential, and the European Commission has done for years a lot to try to align such definitions. And we in NGSI LD work, we're trying to let people point to their definitions. We even have people in India or South Korea pointing to really quite, well, to me, strange things which I never saw in Europe. So it works. So the point is don't reinvent the wheel as a city. Try to find something suitable and at the most adapt it. And of course, as you adapt, you find more players who will help you to use it or to improve it. So now I want to point briefly to the project Standardization 1023, which is running now. And you'll find a recent publication from them. I'm happy to be involved as a series editor. And Joel Myers was the main editor of this document with several hundred documents on the landscape of standards related to smart cities. So please go to that link and you'll find a lot. But what you can see here is a mind map based on the standards in that report. Just giving you an idea, you can go inside Europe, inside Spain, as we heard, Sweden, Danish, we should try to put in next time on the map, and global, of course. You can find a lot of material which is highly useful. Senelec have a lot on construction, buildings, accessibility, and in that report or in the mind map, you can click and go to these places and get access one way or another to the report. United Kingdom, I should say, has got a lot of material which is for English readers very accessible and quite interesting on processes, security, circular economy. Globally, you can go looking at the OECD or ITUT, of course, ISO IC, as we heard from Michael, with a lot of information. Disaster handling, I remember 10 years ago, it was not high on the agenda of standards organizations, but we all know we've all been close to disasters in the last 10 years. Fortunately, I myself not at one, but there are so many places where you realize afterwards the city should have done something different to make life survivable or better. And this kind of standard, don't overlook it. It's a tool. So keep looking for the right tools. Please be flexible. Please use tools or standards which allow the interoperability. And I do push for open source where you can get it, because not only does it reduce the lock-in effect, but it does bring in a whole community of past and future users who can help to find out what's going wrong, because eventually something will go wrong, but you can fix it if you have open source. And finally, we need to get these data pumps running. And I was very glad to hear from the beginning of the series of talks, the Commission's work to get a data space running for smart cities, and especially linked open data would be already used very much and promoted by the Commission, but making it more, can you say, more part of the operations of cities rather than a kind of history of what happened with last year with environmental issues. That is good, but we need to get it operationalized. So finally, this is me again, and where I'm active, please ask me anything on those topics. And thanks very much for this time slot.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Again, crisp, clear, in fact, a problem statement, but also an invitation. May I ask all the colleagues now to turn on your cameras and join the conversation? We have 10 minutes here. Of course, it's impossible to touch upon everything, but that will also save you, so you don't have to answer anything. We have been, around this, and you could of course slice and dice it. We will have, right after this, we will have a session around the European Cities Mission. So what's the role of digital there? The environment, you could say. Right after that, we will focus on the proximity economy. So the economy aspect there. And right after that, we will have a session on privacy and security and trust, so the social aspects. And actually tomorrow morning, Lindsay, we will have the Stand ICT, and Ray Walsh will introduce the so we will dive into all the details. So let me pose you a different question. Now, here we are, here you are. If you will want something that the others would provide, what would it be? I mean, clearly we need some specifications. I don't think that the policy level will provide specifications, but they need it, okay? Clearly we need guidance. The standardization organizations do not necessarily provide, big guides on how to do things. So who does that? So we need all of these things, but who makes it? So I don't know if you want to start, Cristina, but I give you the opportunity. You can say, I want to go last. So you give like a last comment and we take it the other way around the table. What do you say, Cristina?
I'd like to go last because actually my question would be exactly the one that you just did. So I'd like to hear what the colleagues in the panel want to say. And perhaps then, if you allow me just to take your place for a few seconds, to ask them also a few questions, because I found their very interoperable presentations, mostly all converging on the key points, but still I have some, questions that I would like to pass to them. Thanks.
Oh, that's very good. So Lindsay, you had your hand raised. Did you want to say something? We also got
yes, just briefly. I know that Standardization project is very interested in the next year to enhance the interaction between the standards and the users. Because as you just said, Martin, that's the biggest problem. People publish something, it's done, but the people actually have to use it, scratch their heads to see, is it fit for their purpose? What does it really mean, etc., etc. So trying to build up a kind of crowdsourcing is everybody's problem, and at least Standardization has been supported by the Commission to help that happen. OASC has done it in the past and currently, but we're all facing a huge problem of, I don't know, 3,000 experts and 10,000 users who don't fit in the same room. Thanks.
Well, you just explained eloquently, Lindsay, why we're putting on the C/C festival. So we want to make these many-to-many connections and then hope that good things will happen. Okay, maybe we can chalk that up as your question to the others. Let's see how much time we have. Tania, do you want to reflect as an NSB? What can you not do? What do you need? Policymakers on all kinds of levels to do, or we have to be a little bit concise on the timing and also
definitely we need coordination between standards organizations, standards developers, because otherwise we will reinvent the wheel too many times, and we all know that there is no room for that anymore in this post-pandemic context that we are living. And what we want is a strong commitment from European cities, the consultation to the European cities. Maybe ICLEI has here something to say, not individually from the different members, but come to that. And obviously to ask the European Commission for a standardization request on the field of smart cities, specific for the digitalization of the cities in Europe. I think that will be the best if we want to continue building and to go for the digital twins and all this that we have been discussing these days.
Thank you so much, Tania. Michael, what would you like someone else to do? I mean,
well,
you're already doing all of the things.
So the thing I'm very passionate about is I'd like a much stronger European voice in international standardization. It's not because the other voices aren't important. I think it's amazing that what China's doing, what Japan's doing, so much to learn from those things, but we are missing a strong European voice, and I think that means international standardization is the weaker for it. And the challenge is the Chinese government sees the value of standards and international standards and is supporting and pushing many experts into international standardization. Japanese companies, NEC is a good example here, but Panasonic, Mitsubishi, many other companies in Japan see this is a really important issue, Japan government supporting them. So many Japanese companies are sending experts. Korea, it's education, technical institutions, and others, and we see this great strong voice because people see strategically the value of this. But unfortunately, we're very fragmented in Europe. It's individual countries sending people. Their Standardization ICT has a great role in funding experts, and I think it will be great to use that more strategically within the Commission. I think bringing together a European voice, again, that's a kind of a European Commission aspect, so that it's not a German voice and a Spanish voice and a Portuguese voice, but actually, while we continue to have our national differences, but to have some kind of an overall European voice where we could go together into the different bodies and share much more widely. And for Tania, all of those standards that you've developed in Spanish, I don't read Spanish. So how can we get, how can we get those out there and all the learning you've done in Spain and everything else and similarly around and NGSRD continue to develop it. We need it, and this is the great. We're building our MIMS, and you're doing the work of extending and building the value of that. And of course, you know, ISO. I think that the thing that's often missed is the valuable work TC268 is doing in management standards. It's all very well to have data standards and all the other things, and they need to be done, but having making sure we've got the management systems in place behind that, it is a vital piece of work. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And of course, we had earlier this morning after the opening session, we had on the indicators and the management part, how do we measure that, you know, actually what we do is making things better, comparing Europe and Japan. So Bernard, what would you want if you got an extra Christmas wish?
No, I maybe very quickly also, because time is running, but I think we are moving, or we want to, we have a very ambitious target to move to carbon neutral cities by 2050, which is something extremely, let's say, ambitious, however, extremely important. It is a big revolution for cities to move in that direction. And remember what I said before, what we will decide today will take years, even a decade or even more sometimes, for setting in place the right organization, infrastructures, etc., new model. And then it will last for decades. So what we'll decide today will be what will make cities carbon neutral by 2050. So it's urgent to move ahead or to develop things. However, not everything could be standardized. We need to collect the expression of needs to understand where standards could definitely bring some, let's say, support to the cities in that sense. Sometimes topics are not mature enough for engaging in standardization. And that's why at European level, for instance, we need to strengthen the relation with the policymakers and standardization bodies, but of course, all the cities and network of cities to understand where we need some support for further innovation support, where we need some support for demo project that could become a kind of reference best practice and help in replication and scaling up. And only then we will be able to develop the standards that will be the good driver to everyone. And to me, we need to go in parallel to all of these different development together. That's really what I want to see. And the platform Cristina referred to also initially, it's exactly what we need, exactly what we need. We have the Smart Cities Marketplace, the former EIPSCC in Europe, where we try to collect a lot of things. I was responsible also for collecting some standardization related needs, expression of needs, but finally people do not really understand where and how standards could help. So let's be pragmatic, let's be realistic, and move only where and when it is mature enough through standardization.
Thank you, Bernard. So, Cristina, you have the opportunity. You can ask them anything. You can declare anything, and then we will wrap up the session. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Actually, I have a few comments very quickly. I think I agree with everything I heard today. Definitely their expertise is completing our understanding of the issues, and I think we all agreed on what were the priorities for this area. But I still didn't get how we are going to organize ourselves. So yes, the Commission is happy to support the coordination effort, Tania. Yes, Bernard, we understand the purpose and the urgency. Michael, we know that we have already a number of assets that we have to promote, and Lindsay, the standing project, can do a lot about it, but I don't think it will be enough. We have some constraints like the membership status of the Commission in some of those committees, as you know. We know also that, I said it before, this is a landscape that is as competitive as the market. And we in the Commission cannot rule the whole market logic. Of course, whenever we think that there will be a standard that is needed as a commodity, and I mentioned some of the use cases where we think we need a good standard, okay, we will step into the process and we will make sure that we can support the most open and let's say fit for purpose standard, but it will not be enough. So I think we need a strategy, and I think we all need to collectively abide by the strategy and be very tactical, because we understand how it works in UN organizations. Europe needs to speak with one voice, and that needs to be a little bit orchestrated. And the second point I can say is that in order to do so, I believe that the timing is right. We have a number of stakeholders preparing proposals. So I hope that these proposals will reflect the importance of the standardization approach as it has been presented today. So that's my request to you guys. Perhaps a little bit on the elements that were said before. I mean, there are a number of priorities that may be competing with each other, and that's fine, yes, as the SDOs are sometimes competing with themselves, and that's okay, because this is how you get the best out of it. But we need a mechanism also to have a much more clear mapping of what are the standards that are meeting in principles, and I still don't have it. So that's something that I think we will have to really, really make a lot of effort in the next couple of years to clarify the messages to the cities who everybody recognized don't have the skills, the capacity to say, okay, how do I do this at the implementation stage? It's still very complex. It's still unreadable. There are too many principle standards and things that are perhaps creating a lot of confusion when you're not a technical person. And remember, those who are writing the procurement calls are not necessarily ICT experts. So that's where we need this translation capacity also in those networks who are supporting the cities. And then I have a very small question, but I think it's a detailed one. I didn't get this issue of the necessity to get linked open data as part of C2 operations, but I believe that this is a detail. So maybe Lindsay, you could have a discussion with me later on and explain this further. So all in all, thank you, Martin, because I think that we collectively have made a clear point. Interoperability will always be there. We cannot rule everything, but there are a number of issues here that we need to definitely invest in and resolve, because as Bernard concluded, time is running, and I believe that cities will really play a critical role in the digital and green transformation of Europe. So we will all be collectively supporting these important goals. Thank you, Martin, for making this session as open and as lively as usual. Thanks.
Thank you so much also, Cristina, for these points. And I think that the linked open data real time is more like real time rather than static. So I think that's the shift. So we need to provide all of this. It's like we need to digital twin and so on. Okay, but let's thank our colleagues here in the panel, and thank you for the audience to join us here in the live, and if you see this later, and then in fact leave the floor to our colleague Cornelia and the colleagues from the Net Zero Cities effort, which are exactly underpinning the mission to have climate neutral and smart cities. So what a wonderful bridge here. Now we get practical. We have this session on the green, we get later the proximity economy, and then the privacy. So stay with us. Thank you so much to our panelists, and over to you, Cornelia.